Hello. Did you know that queer people exist and have existed as long as humans have been around? Yet for most of history, they have been overlooked, silenced, and oppressed to the extent that even queer representation today makes most people go, what are these strange new concepts I need to learn to refamiliarize myself with the world? Well, fortunately, while queerness is neither new nor strange, we at The Mesh are here to help you understand. This video series is a curation of unique experiences and stories, as told by those who live these stories themselves. Welcome to
We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Queer Diaries, where we talk to members of the queer community about their hobbies, interests, and their passions. Here with us, we have a dear buddy, an odd buddy, if you will, Ruth. Ruth, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm 30 years old. Birthday was on Thursday, so that's exciting. I live in Missouri in the United States, but I'm from Texas. I've lived here for about 7 years, so um, both in relatively rural places. So it's kind of been rough being a little gaby here in the country.
All right. Um, would you mind telling us a little about what you, just how you fill your days? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so I have 4 cats. They take up a lot of my time. Um, they're really great though. Um, I like to garden. I have some tomato plants that I'm taking care of right now and pea plants. So I finally got to harvest some things last week. That was nice. Um, and I volunteer a lot. I go to this church. It's not a Christian church because I'm not a Christian, but it's like multi faith. So we do a lot of stuff in the community.
All right. Um, and what do you do for a living?
I actually work as a one on one support for disabled adults, and I
Okay.
actually really enjoy that job. I also am autistic, so and I have ADHD, so they can accommodate me as an employee. Like if I need stuff, like days off, or if I'm running late, like if something came up, they're very flexible and understanding. And then like the clients that I have, some of them are autistic, some of them have like cerebral palsy. It just depends on the person, and every shift looks different. It's like taking them to the grocery store or helping them clean the house or taking them somewhere that they enjoy, just stuff like that.
That does sound like a really fulfilling job.
Very, yes. I'm really, really glad that I have it.
Okay. Um, so, uh, Coming to the question of identity, so it's always a gradual thing, right? Like, first there's the questioning, then uh, there is the denial, then there's the acceptance, and you go through all these different stages. Uh, but is there any one specific moment that stands out for you?
Well, um, I was raised in a very conservative, traditionalist Christian family. Um, I was pretty young when I started like refusing to let them dress me up for church on Sundays. Um, I'm somewhat feminine presenting even now, but I don't like the really hyper feminine stuff most of the time.
Right.
And they would want to put these like hard shoes on my feet, like the baby heels. and like hose on my legs, like tight hose and like a tight dress, which are all sensory triggers for me. So um, it was kind of a disability thing, but it was also kind of a queer thing because in the church where I was raised, there's a really strict belief about women being second class citizens, basically. Um, and like, you're not supposed to speak during the service. Like, there's no women ushers passing the plate around to collect money. There's no women preaching. There's no women doing anything except they can teach kids Sunday school. So that was the role of the woman in the church, was to teach the kids Sunday school. Um, and they it's really intense psychological like programming to like obey men in a very specific way. So the whole thing just made me super uncomfortable because they like were clearly very invested in me, but not as like a person, more as like a potential servant and wife to somebody in the
Yeah.
future. Is really bizarre. So
Yeah.
even a totally straight cis woman, I think, has an issue with that, experience growing up. So I have a lot in common with other like assigned female people who aren't trans or queer at all. Um, but then for me it goes like a little deeper. So I was probably like 6 whenever I like refused to let them dress me up for church.
Hmm. You know what? It's kind of a culture shock for some people that, in the United States, you don't have school uniforms, but you do have like dress codes and stuff. Here in India, for example, uh, every school has its uniform. So there is this specific outfit you have to wear every day. And I think both of them are in their own ways like try to please what how you just present yourself, and it also reinforces the boundary because we had different uniforms for boys and girls, and I'm sure in the United States the dress codes were different for girls and boys as well.
Yeah, it's more like the dress code basically just exists for girls. Like, I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever in my life heard of a guy getting sent to the office for a dress code violation, but that happens constantly. Like, this is the kind of thing that would be like against a dress code, because it goes too low. Although I don't really have very big breasts, so I'd probably get away with it. But that's where it becomes very obvious that it's hypocritical, because you get away with it based on how your body looks. So a young girl who's like got big breasts and like lots of like padding, she's curvy, it's like she can't wear anything to school, because no matter what, she's going to get stared at. She has to then be the only person basically that worries about the dress code. Like, anybody else can violate the dress code and nobody really cares. But if she did it, she would get sent to the office. But yeah, I think the school uniform thing is really unique about the US, because it's like a lot of other places do that. And there's
Yeah.
like, I know over the last few years, the boy love or BL genre has made a lot of film appearances, like especially in Thailand and like Southeast Asia. Um, and there's a lot of plot lines about how the uniform is marginalizing to people who aren't just one, either binary gender.
Yeah. Also, sorry, the weather here is killing me. I'm sweating
Oh,
buckets. I have to wipe my face every once in a while. Um,
I'm so sorry.
it's terrible. It's um, you know, global warming.
I know
What
it's
else
been
can you
like the
say?
last 2 weeks have had the 7 hottest days on record. Scary. It's a
Right.
good segue
Um,
into the later.
no, but so that was the moment, like when it first sparked, when like you thought about these like dress codes and uniforms.
Yeah, the gender presentation thing became
Yeah.
a really big like no for me at a very early age. And then it was like by
Like,
the time I was a few years older, like when I was 9 or 10 years old, like my cousin, I went with to the store just like to get. He was just going to get something, and I was like, I want to leave the house. Can I? And while we were there, I asked him to let me get a haircut because this was like one of those big Walmarts that has like a barber in the front. Um, and I had the barber cut my hair off like this short all the way around. Um,
right.
my cousin was a little bit naive at the time, so he was like young as well in college. So yeah, an adult, he could take me to the store, but he wasn't like thinking, he needed to ask any permission. He did ask my mom if I could get a haircut, but he just called her on her landline, and I don't think they were texting yet. Um, and so then I come home, asked for a boy's haircut at the haircut place, and but I was my brother. And then when she realized that I wasn't, she screamed. She was fine after that, but
I
I
I
pulled some stunts whenever I was younger.
Oh, believe me, I have pulled stunts, and I completely understand what you mean when you say like initially they were angry, but then they were like, you know, my child, I'm kind of proud of you.
Yeah, actually, my mom is a whole other story, of her own. But whenever I was an
Hmm.
infant, she was actually still pregnant with my little brother, and my older sister was just 2. My dad
Right.
died, so she had to raise all of us all by herself. And she
That
was a
must have
stay-at-home
been, yeah.
mom. She didn't have a college degree. She didn't have a career established, so she moved back to where her family was from. So that's where I was raised in West Texas. Um, but yeah, she wanted us to have a community, so she participated in that stuff with us. Like she would take us to church, but like when I started refusing to put on dresses and stuff to dress up for church, she never tried to force me. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so it
Yeah.
was it was definitely like that. Like she was like, okay. So she always like had my back with stuff, even if she didn't really understand it,
Okay.
because there was no
So
like
it wasn't like
support.
begrudging. She was just like, it wasn't begrudging. She was just like, casually just like on your in your corner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there is something to be said of just like
It's
what it
nice
takes
to
to
have.
unpack the like internalized stuff. There's stuff because she's a 55-year-old woman, so she comes from a generation with a lot more of the phobias in the culture, but like just there have only been a few little speed bumps along the way where she had to like unpack something discomfort, inside her. But yeah, it was nice. It was nice to have her in my corner.
Hmm. I have a pretty lovely relationship with my mother. She's really sweet. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm really privileged in that way that I have such a sweet mother. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, uh, she's the best. I don't know what else to say. Uh,
Yeah, I understand that sometimes it's just like not gonna happen, like a good
yeah,
relationship with mom
yeah.
for whatever reason. But I can say, you know, me and my mom, we she's always been in my corner with things like that, but that doesn't mean by any definition like we have not had an easy relationship. My mom is really sweet, but she also has like a really fiery side and PTSD. I mean, we our whole family
Hmm.
has PTSD, and so the culture that I grew up in was very very violent, and she had to realize that things were wrong. Like when I was very little, she disciplined us the way that she was disciplined by whipping us with a belt. So I can remember like holding my butt, covered in, not that she had like beat me all over, but like on my butt, and to her that was how you were supposed to discipline children. So, but it wasn't very long before she got to the point where she was like, this is like mean, I like
Yeah.
don't want to keep doing this, because even though she had the PTSD and the anger, she's like still herself underneath that. So I would
Although it is
say,
commendable to introspect in such a way when there's generational trauma involved.
yeah, I mean, that's how all of her siblings were raised. And um, yeah, I mean, there was no other model available to her.
Right.
She just
Yeah.
like, so yeah, I mean, that caused me to have trauma, but as an adult, I can understand that what she did was like she gave up that tool after she realized that that was wrong. And that's pretty good. I mean, a lot of people won't do that. A lot of people will like double down on the thing that they're doing wrong and just do whatever mental gymnastics are required
Right.
to defend that position. But she didn't do that. So um, have we had road bumps? Absolutely. We've had some really rough times, but that's just because our family, including us, are very mentally ill. And I'm here to say, like, if your parents want to have a relationship with you and they're not totally dodging accountability, even if it's hard, I think you should try, because parents are people too. Like, they're
Yeah.
just human. Like,
It's really difficult to think of them as people because you've known them since before you develop your idea of personhood. So like before you knew what a person was, they were already part of your life. So like it's hard to
yeah.
see them as people sometimes.
Yeah. And biologically, neurobiologically, we are hardwired to see our parents differently from other people. And there's like, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with neurobiology, but there is like a sense of entitlement. Like, you owe me your, you know, explanations. Like my nervous system takes priority. Like, if I'm upset, you're supposed to soothe me, kind of a thing. And there's some, you know, there's some ways that that is kind of true. Parents do owe things to their children in a sense, but what that is depends on your context. There's not a prescription. So uh, everybody has to just live with whatever decisions they make as a parent. Like, once it's done, it's done. And you know it's easy for kids to be angry about things that happened, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be
Okay,
angry, because we should feel it.
that's something I want to kind of pivot to. Moving away from like how your family accepted, like your family's reaction to your journey. Internally, like what was the transitional period like? From the moment you
Oh
first
yeah, from
started raising
inside.
questions to where you are now. Like what was it? What has it been like?
it's been really weird because I did internalize all of that programming that I was given as a child. So even though I, by the time I was like 9 or 10, I was like critically thinking about the theology of everything and like kind of already deconstructing a little bit of that. I was
Right.
still a child and I didn't have like, the cognitive processes that I needed to really get out of that.
Like
So I
we'll
can
yeah, we'll
remember.
obviously get back to the theology aspect because that is something you mentioned being passionate about. So we will put a pin in that. We will discuss that at length shortly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
because that was a big part of it. But
yeah.
by that point when I was like 9 or 10, and then from then till about the time I was like 16, so about 6 or 7 years, that was when I have distinct memories of being like homophobic or um, some other kind of bigoted, even though it was like part of my identity. Um, so I had to unpack like,
I
well,
think
what am I?
bigotry is so deep rooted in our culture that like we are raised by default to be bigots and we have to like unlearn it in order to be, also
Absolutely.
a
And
quick question. What did
uh
you think of guava juice?
I like guava juice.
I love guava juice. It's
I
like,
mean, it's not everybody's favorite texture. That's fine. But I also like
yeah.
coconut water. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm almost grateful for the way that my upbringing was like in such a hardcore, like fundamentalist place because I feel like I'm in somewhat of a minority with that. Like, not a, like it's a pretty big minority, but um, like most people have a more midline kind of upbringing. Like, yeah, it's usually religious, but also like it's not as like sexist and all of the other stuff. But I'm so much a thinker of like shades of gray and nuance that if I had been raised in a more moderate culture, I may not have been able to like see through the
Hmm.
structure through into the
Yeah.
bigotry because there's like a schema, like a facade that's hiding the
Yeah.
bigotry, like so that people are drawn to the church because they want to be good people, but then they just turn into victims. So internally, I spent like 6 or 7 years unpacking the like being gay as sin and like it was just the whole concept of sin in general. So like I
Uh,
went to
I have a
different
question.
churches.
Have you
Hmm.
watched the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Oh my god, yes,
You watched the show, right? What do
yes.
you think of the representation of Mac's journey? You know, the whole Catholic guilt, the whole internalized homophobia, the coming to terms with it, just like going back into denial, all of it. What do you think of that? I just want to know how you feel about that.
That is so funny that you would ask me about that because I'm not like a big Always Sunny watcher. It's like I can't watch cringe too much. It hurts me on a cellular level. But that one, that's like my favorite plot line in that show because it's actually super accurate with the like really aggressive hatred, like that. And I know
And the
that's
self-loathing.
yes, there's layers
Okay,
to it because it's
okay,
like I'm
think
not.
about it this way. Think about it this way. I am a brown boy. I am an Indian living in India, and somehow I'm Catholic guilt up to here just because I attended Catholic schools all my life.
Goddamn colonizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me sick. It really does. I mean, I feel like we have to talk about it so that we can figure out what we can do about it, because that's not right. Like, I'm not
It's
saying
not
that Catholicism is like inherently evil, but like the Catholic Church as a organization,
institution. Yeah.
it is a predator like organization. I mean,
It is predatory in other ways as well, as in it like offers aid to those who I almost dropped Mr. Axolotl. Uh, it provides aid to people who need it, but terms and conditions apply.
right, right. Yeah, like one of my pet peeves is the idols that Americans usually have. Like Americans love Gandhi. We've talked about that before. Um,
Yeah,
and Americans love Mother Teresa because Americans genuinely believe that she opened like hospitals in India. And I have to constantly go around correcting people like, okay, what she opened were like open air tents with like priests, not medical staff, because she believed that suffering was the closest
suffering.
you could be to God.
Yeah,
And
God.
so
Yeah,
she had sick people coming in to be close to God, not to get healed. Like she just wanted to witness their suffering and not help them. It's
and
like
also,
it's like worse
she
than
needed
doing
to.
nothing.
Also, she would convert them to Catholicism before they died, so that one more
That was
soul
it.
saved.
Exactly. That was the religious agenda. It was like she could have opened hospitals. She had the resources to have done that.
Yeah.
But instead, she was just trying to save their souls before they died. She was like, "Let me see how many karma points I can get." like like Catholics won, like that's the evangelical mindset. That's the Christian mindset, is like we're all just souls to be like one,
I
for
I
God.
find the I for one find the dichotomy between like Catholicism and Protestantism like pretty fascinating. They're both
It is.
they're both very oppressive in very different ways.
Yes. And what's interesting is Catholicism, the origination of the Catholic Church. I guess this could be the history thing that we talk about. The origin of the Catholic Church was like Constantine was like, how do I get all these witches to follow Christ? And so then they came up with a bunch of fake pagan rituals with Catholic, or rather, Christian imagery instead. So Catholicism is actually quite witchy. It's interesting. They have a lot of like pagan
I
ritual
mean, it would
inspiration.
if it wasn't so normalized, it would absolutely seem like a pagan religion. A guy gets killed and rises from the dead 3 days later. That's like a pagan story if I've heard one.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, all right.
And,
I think we need to move on with the next section because we keep going into tangents that we have planned for later.
mhm.
All right. So you wanted to talk about music. You even mentioned some specific artists. But
Yeah,
first, I want to ask you: did any piece of music play a significant role in you understanding yourself better?
yeah. Um, the song that I talked to you about, called "The Ocean" by Blue October. Um, a lot of people my age have heard this song a million times because it was super
Um,
popular on the radio. Um,
Ruth, we lost you
and
there for a second.
can you hear me?
Wait, I can hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying the song that we talked about before, Blue October's Into the Ocean. A lot of people my age have heard this song a million times because it was really popular on the radio. Um, and there's a particular line in it where it says, "Wish I was much more masculine." The singer is male, um, and I had already heard of this band before I heard this song, and I was already a fan of this band. Um, but that song is like kind of softer by comparison to their other music from that time. Um, and the singer writes a lot of songs about his bipolar and depression. So that's really what Into the Ocean is about. But when he when I heard the line "Wish I was much more masculine," I just thought that was really interesting because from my perspective, like relating to that, the line would be "Wish I was much more feminine," I guess, to parallel that experience. It's like at that
Right.
time, I didn't have the concept of what trans was.
Right.
That didn't exist in my mind, but that kind of opened like the option of like maybe we don't have to fit into this like thing, maybe it's okay that people don't just all fit into this box.
Yeah. Um, all right. Uh, you told us about, you know, an average day in your life. So what I wanted to know was, um, has has any aspect of your day changed, like in a significant way over the years, directly as a consequence of you, you know, accepting yourself more and more?
Yeah. um I suppose like grooming is probably the closest thing because I've changed my appearance like I don't even know how many times. So many times. I've had different haircuts and styles. Um, that's just kind of like a part of my personality. But it's interesting because in the times of my life where I've been the most fraught about my relationship to my identity, like when I was still unpacking homophobia or transphobia, or when I was really struggling to feel like I had acceptance and support. Um, those were the times where I felt the least comfortable being feminine. And it's interesting because when I'm in a good place, like right now, like I've had long hair for a few years now.
Hmm.
I kind of more often will present feminine, and it's partially because when I go to work, everybody just calls me like she, and I haven't come out at work. It's just one of those things. I live in a state where it's called right to work. There's not really like employment rights.
Oh,
Um,
oh, just for posterity's sake, could you tell our viewers what your pronouns are?
yes, yes. I use they them pronouns.
All right.
Um, and then sometimes I'm like gender fluid and I kind of identify with a lot of genders. So sometimes I'll present like in a hyper feminine way, or sometimes I'll present in a more masculine way. And in those cases, um, other pronouns don't trigger me. So I'm I'm thankful for that part of my um, like journey. I've finally gotten to the point where I'm like desensitized. That's very nice.
All right.
Ah, Go
Um,
ahead.
so there was the internalized queerphobia. So there must have been denial at some point, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, definitely.
so once you got over your denial, did you ever suffer from any sort of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm one of those like middle of the road, like I'm bisexual or pansexual, you know. I kind of identify with the term pansexual just because when I first came across it, it was like defined as having an attraction to
Right,
individuals regardless of their gender. Like,
right,
I don't really have a specific um, attraction to a specific gender, if that makes sense. But I find different individuals of different genders to be attractive. So, anyway, um, I I've been in a lot of relationships with men, and like I have a child, and I was married to a guy. So, um, because I'm not like a binary trans man, and I'm not like a lesbian, it's weird. It's a weird space to occupy. There's not really like, I don't know, queer representation that looks like me, or has a life like me in most cases. So, um, yeah.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
no, do uh, continue. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, that's okay.
Uh,
Um,
yeah,
it did take a while before I felt like comfortable claiming that identity.
right. And you do not have to answer this question unless you're absolutely comfortable with it. But since you brought up the fact that you have been married, um, would you, in in whatever capacity you're comfortable answering, could you answer the question, what was marriage like to you, for you?
Yeah,
Not even your experiences, just like you know, how, what it felt like to you.
yeah. It was interesting because in a way I was already trained to do that because of my upbringing.
Hmm.
And even though I rejected the ideology, I did always want to have a family. I really liked that idea. And so I was young. I was like 19 when I met this guy, and then 20 when we got married. And just because of the upbringing that I had, I wasn't taught I wasn't taught healthy relationship skills. I was actually taught how to be in a toxic relationship.
As
So
uh,
unfortunately,
as a
that is what
brown man,
happened.
as a brown man living in India, I relate to that sentiment.
You can understand. Yes.
I was taught
So,
no, I was endowed with no emotional intelligence.
yeah, like the opposite of emotional intelligence. Like, hey, if you have concerns, pray about it and shut up. Like, that's the emotional coping skills that women are taught in the tradition that I come from. So, and like make sure your husband is always happy. So I tried that advice, although thankfully I had already started going to therapy. So I had that anchor. Um, but, I had a child. Being pregnant was definitely weird as like a gendered experience. Women's this, women's that, everything's pink, and then of course there's all this pressure to like tell people what your baby's genitals are, and it's like, I'm sorry, why do you need to know that information? Like, what does it matter? It's a baby. Like, so all of that was really tough. Like, I don't think that cis women like understand how much they're participating in that oppressive scheme by doing all of that stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like assigning a gender to their baby. It's supposed to be like such a cute little thing, you know?
I feel it's just like subconsciously internalized. Uh, you know, like nobody even thinks about it. It's although to be
Yeah.
fair, it's not really that much of a thing in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very like American thing for sure.
Hmm.
Like
It
obviously
isn't
sexism
in
exists everywhere
it's
and
an
transphobia
Indian thing as
everywhere.
well, but in India it's for a completely different reason. It's because you know sexism and parents want a boy, they do not want a girl. So if it's a boy, it's time to celebrate. If it's a girl, you know what, try again.
Yeah.
If you see
Yep.
an Indian family with like uh there are siblings and the youngest sibling is a boy and all the other siblings before them are girls, you know exactly what happened there. They just wanted like a male heir, and
Yep.
it's fucked
Yeah,
up.
it is. It is. And yeah, I powerless a lot of the time because these things are so big and there's like so much that people buy into without even realizing it. So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to exist in contradiction to that. But yeah, even though I tried my best to be, you know, a good wife and just like a regular girl, it just doesn't really work like that. I had started to come to terms with my gender before the end of my marriage, but that was in 2016.
Have you by any
So
chance heard of the album Divorce Lawyers I Shaved My Head by Jordan Mason and the Resource Museum?
no, I haven't.
Oh, yeah, it's an incredible work of art, and I think you would really enjoy it.
Nice. I did shave my head during my divorce, so
Oh no, it's like an extremely raw album. It'll like, eh, yeah, just check it out. Just check it out whenever you get the time.
okay.
All right. So would you say that right now you feel at peace with your identity and how you present yourself?
Well, like I said a second ago, you know, there's so much out of our control that is like deeply, deeply programmed into people. So as far as like what I can do about it, yes, I am happy with what I'm doing. But um like if we're being technical about it, no, cuz like I tailor my presentation a lot to avoid triggering the people that live where I live because it's so conservative here. Um you know, when I've dressed up in more androgynous fashions or more masculine ways, um, you know, kids like actually stare at me like all of the kids, you know, not just like a few of them. Um, and there have been there's been no like violent incidences, thankfully, but yeah, I mean, because of the pressures of just trying to survive in this environment, I don't really have the true freedom of expression that I would like to have. But as far as like within the constraints that I exist in, yeah, I mean, like I have a mullet, so I'm not like super normal looking, you know.
Oh, this is me moonlighting as a guy with normal hair. I actually have a mohawk, but I haven't put product in my hair, so like I can make
Nice.
it look normal.
Yes. I used to have a mohawk, and I would do the same thing, so it's a good strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like put a bandana over my hair, and then it just looks like I have, like normal long hair. So it's kind of just like stealthing a little bit, you know. It's just
Um.
not worth all of the arguments that I would
Yeah.
have.
So the limitations to how you would present, are they purely like, socio-political, or like, for me, for example, there are things that there are things, accessories, clothes, whatever, um, anything to do with appearance that I could try out. But I am constrained because I just can't afford the wardrobe I want.
What was that?
I just can't afford the
You just got.
wardrobe I want.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on, but my audio isn't working very well. Do you mind repeating it?
Uh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I was saying like the primary struggle for me usually is that I just can't afford the wardrobe that I want.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah, totally hear you. That's kind of what I was referring to whenever I was saying the pressures of survival. Like
Yeah,
I know that the American economy is totally different than the Indian economy, but I mean, we can agree that things are bad right now. Like where 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 I volunteer at the church that I was talking about, I volunteer on their leadership. So like I help with like employment contracts. Sometimes that's kind of what I'm doing right now, like looking at all of this data, living expenses and wages across the country, and like what are appropriate salaries for different positions in the church. And like of course, since I study history, I think about, when it was instituted during the New Deal, with Roosevelt as the president, and um, it like if it was proportional to inflation from what it was originally, the minimum wage would be like like between $30 and $40 an hour. Like it would be so much higher, and it's actually like I think federally it's $7.25 an hour. So like not even a quarter of what it would be according to inflation.
Y-
So I mean, it just goes to show
you
like the purchasing power of an average person today is like nothing compared to what it was in the past.
you know, for like people without like proper office jobs, like freelance, uh, content creation work is the best avenue for most people my age in India. You know why? Because American companies are always looking for cheap labor.
Yeah, and I mean,
Imagine writing
Americans are
a
like,
whole imagine writing a whole article, like doing the research, like putting in like the work, like writing it, editing it, making sure everything's like up to a certain standard, and you get paid $3. That's like almost insulting at that point. Like you'd rather like get that kind of work done. Like I'll do it for you for free. Like paying me $3 is like insulting.
yeah, and Americans have such a toxic belief that that's like that is out of their control. Like, that's not the kind of thing that is actually out of our control. We actually do have control over that. Like, we can we can um, lobby and ask our government to regulate that, but we choose not to. And it's bad for everybody. Like they're that just degrades the entire system.
Yeah. We really went off on a tangent there. But yeah, what role did your friends and family play in your journey to, you know, the journey to getting to how you present yourself?
How did my friends and family react?
Yeah, what kind of, I mean, did you have a support system? Did you have close friends who, I don't know, reacted in ways you would not expect? Did you find support in places where you would not have expected support? You know, anything of the sort.
Yeah, yeah. I basically just did not have support until I actually started going to this church, the UU church here in Springfield, Missouri. So that was unexpected. I didn't think a church would be. Well, I never thought I would go back to a church. Actually, once I decided that I wasn't a Christian anymore. Um, but yeah, my family has. At this point, there are a few people who have tried to
So,
keep up. Like
um,
my mom, my brother, and my sister, my grandma.
right. So another thing I'm interested in hearing about is what was leaving Christianity like for you? Because it is, uh, you know, quite illuminating. Whatsoever. I mean, leaving any religion sounds like you'd be subject to alienation, but Christianity. I've heard stories of people who got like shunned by the community because they gave up on their faith.
Yeah, so some Christian traditions take the shunning thing really, really literally and seriously. And the tradition that I come from isn't like explicit with it, but they they do prioritize people in the religion over members. Um, like for economic things. So like if you're not Christian, it's hard to get a job, harder. You're not supposed to ask about that kind of stuff according to the laws in the US, but they do. It's like, yeah. Anyway, it was hard, and I went the dramatic route. I was like, I swung hard in the opposite direction into atheism, which I do still consider myself an atheist, but I also like mysticism a lot. So I'm kind of like an agnostic atheist.
So, did you? So, there were these two things happening parallelly. One, you were coming to terms with your identity. Two, you were, you know, uh, sort of distancing, like separating yourself from your identity as a Christian. And,
Yeah.
uh, you know, did you develop any specific coping mechanisms to deal with, like, all of that, I imagine, overwhelming transition?
Yeah. I, like I said, I swung hard into the atheism thing because I saw that Christianity was like not actually separate from the government. It was like being aided by the government, like churches don't have to pay tax in this country. That's crazy. They make so much money. They're just extracting resources from people who don't know better, and they think that they're doing good. Church giving like sometimes 10% of their income. So I took an activist route about it, and I really just stayed in therapy the whole time. I never really had. I struggled to form any real relationships, like secure attachments, until the last like 5 or 6 years. I didn't really have a secure attachment, but now I'm doing much better. It took a lot of work. I had pretty severe trauma from everything, but
Could
like
you could you tell us
now
more about
I have a
the
pretty good network.
uh, yeah, could you yeah, I wanted to hear more about that, about you doing better now.
Yeah. So like I said, I stay in therapy. I can't recommend therapy enough to people, and I know it is hard to access, but like just even researching about therapy when you're not in therapy is better than nothing, like learn about modalities that exist out there, like internal family systems, attachment theory, polyvagal theory. There's books to read. And even if you don't have trauma, learning about trauma will help you understand people more. A lot of people
Yeah,
don't get
absolutely.
this.
So with that, Ruth, we've come to the end of this episode, unfortunately. However, we have one final question for you before we depart and meet again in your next appearance. I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell us your favorite joke.
Okay. I heard this one really recently and it quickly became my new favorite. So here it goes. It's a bit of a nerdy one, so bear with me. There are two types of people in this world:
All right.
the kind who can
All right.
extrapolate from incomplete data.
Okay, I get it. I get it. Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Uh, Thank you, Ruth, so much. It's been
Sorry we
wonderful
didn't
having you
follow the
on the
script
show.
so well,
And
but thank you for letting me go on my
oh, that's
tangents. I think it was
fine.
all
We
on
I
topic,
think we
really.
had
It was just more about theology
I
than we
think
had
we
planned.
had an incredible conversation. I think people are going to talk about this dialogue for ages to come. Um, but yeah, I'm now even more excited about the next episode with you, where we talk about your interests specifically.
Thank you. I would love to come back if you decide to have me. Thank you. Y'all take care, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate Tamesh. And if you're watching and you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you again soon.
And with that, we've come to the end of this episode of Queer Diaries. Goodbye.